Don't know that everything's working, but hey, let's go for it. Sunday morning, I got some 707 headband. Start off the day right. I infused some cannabis into coconut oil last night. I've got some of that in my coffee. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as I sit down this morning, one of the first things I read, OSU professor claims that modern fuel reduction thinning makes fires worse are not credible. What? All right. Let's do this though. Sacramento, California, from the Associated Press. Firefighters and numerous studies credit intensive forest thinning projects with helping save communities like those recently threatened near Lake Tahoe in California and Nevada. But dissent from some environmental advocacy groups is roiling the scientific community. So, this is an argument that's been going on for a long time. People who understand the way the forest works have, for a while now, suggested that thinning and forest management of clearing underbrush, prescribed burns, things like that, help reduce these wildfires. I don't want to get too far ahead, but I mean, we've been through this quite a few times, and we kind of know that these dramatic wildfires didn't start happening really until after the roadless rules, where a lot of the forest was just shut down and we said, no, you can't go in there at all. So, and then it was just the underbrush was continuing to grow, the snags were continuing to fall, like all this dead stuff was just building up on the forest floor, and then now here we are. But anyway, we'll hold on to that for a little bit and we'll get through this. States in the U.S. in the U.S. West and the federal government each year thin thousands of acres of dense timber and carve broad swaths through the forest near remote communities, all designed to slow the spread of massive wildfires. These are the thinning projects that we've driven through, and I've showed you guys those. The fire breaks, we drove through those. I've showed you guys where fire breaks are. How they log along the power lines. We've seen all this. So, all right. The projects aim to return overgrown forests to the way they were more than a century ago. Okay, before land managers begin reflexively extinguishing every wildfire as soon as possible. Efforts now include using fire to fight fire, with fires deliberately set in the cooler, wetter months to burn out dangerous fuels, or backfires set in the path of encroaching wildfires. Forest managers credit such burns with helping protect the giant forest in Sequoia National Park. I mean, it makes sense, right? There's not as much shit to burn, the fire's not going to burn as much. While most scientific studies find such forest management is a valuable tool, environmental advocates say data from recent gigantic wildfires support their long-running assertion that efforts to slow wildfires have instead accelerated their spread. And they'd be correct. Because of them, because of the environmentalists and the things that they want and the stuff that they propose, and for some reason, the industry goes along with it, and they're like, okay, let's appease these people that live in cities and don't have any idea how a forest works or what a forest is. Let's go ahead and just go by what they want. Anyway, the argument is fueling an already passionate debate. In my opinion, there's no debate. There's people that don't know what they're talking about versus people who work the forests. But what are you going to do? There's always experts, right? Experts 300 miles away that know what's best for me. Anyway, it's led to a flurry of citations of dueling scientific studies and has fed competing claims that science may be skewing ideology. No. The debate came to a head over this year's giant bootleg fire in southern Oregon. Not only did tens of thousands of acres of recent thinning, fuel breaks, and other forest management fail to stop or slow the fire's rapid spread, but the fire often moved fastest through such areas. Los Padres Forest Watch, a California-based nonprofit, said in an analysis joined by the John Muir Project and Wild Heritage Advocacy. So these are the same people that were advocating for not cutting anything down, for not taking care of the forest, and now they're saying like, well, see, every effort that these people took, this is why the fires are bad. James Johnson, a researcher with Oregon State University's College of Forestry, called the group's conclusion pretty misleading. You don't say. Irresponsible and self-contradicting. Claims that modern fuel reduction thinning make fires worse are not credible, Johnson said. Imagine that. Imagine that these people that are working for a non-profit forest agency that don't live in the forest, imagine that. They're wrong. Anyway. The debate focused on a project where the Klamath Tribe and the Nature Conservancy have spent a decade thinning smaller trees and using planned fires. They and the U.S. Forest Service said the treatment slowed the fire's spread and lessened its intensity, while critics said the blaze made its fastest northern run through the same area, spreading 5 miles in about 13 hours. All right, we won't get into the specifics of how the fire works, and like, if it moves quickly through an area, it's because it's not burning as much. Like, I don't know. I don't want to have to explain the way fire works to these people, but whatever. Scientists say climate change has made the American West much warmer and drier, and will continue to make weather more extreme and wildfires more frequent and destructive, accelerating the need for more large-scale forest treatments. Critics say forest thinning operations are essentially logging projects in disguise. You don't say. That's kind of the point. We're thinning the forest, we're going to log it. That's how you do it. You cut it down, bring a truck in, haul it out, take it to the mill. Whatever. Opening up the forest canopy and leaving more distance between trees reduces the natural humidity and cooling shade of dense forests and allows unimpeded winds to push fire faster, said Chad Hansen, forest and fire ecologist with the John Muir Project. I love me some John Muir, but such reasoning defies the laws of physics, said other experts. Less fuel means less severe fire. Fewer trees means it's more difficult for fires to leap from treetop to treetop. The critics contend recent massive California wildfires also moved quickly through thinned areas that failed to protect communities. Timothy Inglesby, a former federal firefighter who heads Oregon-based Firefighters United for Safety, Ethics, and Ecology, said this year's giant Dixie Fire blew sparks past containment lines, igniting dry branches left by thinning operations near Paradise. The town was nearly destroyed in 2018 in the nation's deadliest and most destructive wildfire in modern times. Tom Porter, director of California's firefighting agency, said critics missed the point. Fuel breaks are one tool that can help slow and channel wildfires while protecting rural homes and communities. Doesn't seem like it's too hard to understand, but I mean, these people that are at the nonprofits that are getting their money, they need to keep their nonprofit status and keep everything running, so they'll just keep saying what they got to say, whatever. Keep collecting donations. The problem is, when you have a head fire that is a mile or miles wide and it's running through timber like it's grass, there isn't a fuel break out there that's going to stop it, Porter said. Each side can point to plenty of competing examples, said John Bailey, professor of silviculture. What the hell is silviculture? And fire management at Oregon State University. Some forest thinning has indeed been mishandled, yet Anywhere that we've done an effective fuels treatment, we have modified fire behavior and reduced the intensity. The contrasting views prompted a contentious debate, with one paper suggesting that supporters of spotted owl habitat, including Hansen of the John Muir Project, are selectively using data that support their agenda. Another paper said such dissenting views have fostered confusion and can slow what the authors contend are necessary forest treatment. So, this whole thing here is a joke. The contrasting views prompted a contentious debate, with one paper suggesting that supporters of spotted owl habitat, anytime one of these environmentalist people starts talking about spotted owl habitat, you can go ahead and write them off as a friggin' nut. My family was hugely impacted by this whole spotted owl debate back in the late 80s, 90s. I'm not 100% sure when it was, all right? Like wood products industry, forest industry. My family is woods people, okay? These people came out because they didn't want any logging done in the forest, which is nowhere near where they live, which is out in the middle of friggin' nowhere. And they came up with this idea that there's this owl that only lives in these trees that these people were gonna log. It turns out it was wrong. They were wrong. The owls don't live in only that specific habitat. But you don't hear that story that these people were completely wrong about the spotted owl. And you don't hear about the economies and the towns and the cities that were completely devastated by these city folk who think they know where owls live. Anyway, we're getting off topic. Where were we? Hansen dismissed the criticism as character assassination, driven by those who benefit from logging or are reluctant to embrace what he insists is the evolving science. On average, all things being equal, the thinned areas tend to burn more rapidly and more intensely most of the time, he said, citing his own research, including a broad 2016 review of 3 decades of 1,500 fires across the western U.S. conducted with the Arizona-based Center for Biological Diversity and Oregon-based GEOS Institute. The division reflects both evidence and understandable emotion. But the division reflects both evidence and understandable emotion. When wildfire destroy homes or ecological treasures, said Erica Fleischman, a professor at Oregon State University's College of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences. But the division reflects both evidence and understandable emotion. Okay, gotcha. The competing arguments are part of the legitimate policy and scientific debate, according to Shar Miller, a professor of environmental analysis at California's Pomona College, who has written extensively about wildfires, including with Hansen. Forest managers can cite examples like where a 400-foot wide, 120-meter fuel break helped protect rural Sierra Nevada homes. The U.S. Forest Service produced a video called Fuels Treatments Work, a creek fire success story, and Cal Fire featured it in a fuels reduction guide. Clearly, it's a matter of debate in policy arenas and management. But I think in terms of the scientific literature, the evidence is overwhelming, said John Battles, a professor of forest ecology at the University of California, Berkeley. So, that's it. We don't really get to a conclusion here, but anyway, it's the same argument we've been having for a long time. There's people at colleges and in cities that that probably never worked in a forest, have never held a chainsaw, never been outside of the office or outside of the concrete jungle they live in, you know? And they say, hey, you can't cut down trees and you can't build fire lines because you're hurting. And then you've got people whose livelihoods depend on that forest and whose safety depends on that forest being managed properly. I mean, what are you going to do? Who are you going to listen to? The people in the university, or are you going to listen to the people sitting in the people working in the forest? I don't know. But I'll tell you where I have kind of a conundrum with it, okay? Because these university people and these city people who are the ones, I don't even know what I got to think, are the ones who are saying you can't do anything. The city folk, you can't touch the forest. You can't do anything with the forest. But at the same time, let's switch over here. These city folks are also the ones that are telling us that the colonizers or the Europeans or whatever they're calling them, they're the ones who like stole the land, right, from the Native Americans, land back and all that. All right, okay, city folk, let's go through this. This is from Wikipedia, which we know is 100% credible because it's Wikipedia, right? Here's an entire section all about Native American use of fire in ecosystems. So, I mean, do we need to read this too? Because we can. Prior to European colonization of the Americas, indigenous people used controlled burns to modify the landscape. The controlled fires were part of the environmental cycles and maintenance of wildlife habitats that sustained the cultures and economies of the indigenous peoples of the Americas. What was initially perceived by colonists as untouched, pristine wilderness in North America was actually the cumulative result of those occasional managed fires, creating an intentional mosaic of grassland and forests across North America, sustained and managed by the original peoples of the land base. So wait, you're telling me that the loggers and the people that are down here cutting down these trees and thinning the forest, they're just modeling their behavior after the Native Americans? Whoa. Next thing you're going to tell me that they're using wood to build their houses, which means they were cutting down trees to build their cedar plank homes. Mind blown. Man, and I didn't even finish college. Radical disruption of indigenous burning practices occurred with European colonization and forced relocation of those who had historically maintained the landscape. Some colonists understood the traditional use and potential benefits of low-intensity broadcast burns, Indian-type fires, but others feared and suppressed them. In the 1880s, impacts of colonization had devastated indigenous populations, and fire exclusion had become more widespread. So now we're to the point where putting out the fires is white supremacy. What are we going to do about that? Not managing the forest is white supremacy now because, I mean, it's right here in Wikipedia. What are we going to do? Where do we go from here? I mean, we can't have it both ways, right? I'm not sure what to do. By the early 20th century, fire suppression had become the official U.S. federal policy. So the Native Americans used to field burn, used to burn the underbrush, and they used to log. And then you're telling me these Europeans came in here and said, whoa, we're not going to do that anymore. And now you're siding with the colonizers? What? You can't do that. That makes you guys hypocrites. You can't side with the colonizers. So what are we going to do? Authors such as William Henry Hudson, Longfellow, Francis Parkman, and Thoreau contributed to the widespread myth that pre-Columbian North America was pristine natural wilderness. A world of barely perceptible human disturbance. At the time of these writings, however, enormous tracts of land had already been allowed to succeed to climax due to the reduction in anthropogenic fires after the depopulation of native peoples from epidemics of disease introduced by Europeans in the 16th century, forced relocation, and warfare. Prior to the arrival of Europeans, Native Americans played a major role in determining the diversity of their ecosystem. The most significant type of environmental change brought about by pre-Columbian human activity was the modification of vegetation. Vegetation was primarily altered by cleaning of forest and by intentional or clearing of forest and by intentional burning. Natural fires certainly occurred, but varied in frequency and strength in different habitats. Anthropogenic fires, for which there is ample documentation, tend to be more frequent but weaker, with a different seasonality than natural fires, and thus had different types of influence on vegetation. The result of clearing and burning was in many regions the conversion of forest to grassland, savanna, scrub, or open woodland, and forest with grassy openings. Fire was used to keep large areas of forest and mountains free of undergrowth for hunting or travel, or to create berry patches. You can kind of see the conundrum, right? You see where we are? What are we supposed to do, man? These guys can't have it both ways. Good morning. Let's burn the trees. So we either... I mean, I don't really know how to say it any better than that. Like, these college people who on one hand are telling me that I have to respect all indigenous everything and that something's wrong with me for being here, are telling me that I can't manage the forest you see where we go? You see where we have kind of a conundrum here? Because you can't have it both ways. You can't tell me that I'm doing everything wrong, but if I follow Native American practices and try to stay true to the land, that I'm also wrong. So, I mean, which is it? Which one do you want? It becomes more and more clear how hypocritical these people are, and you can kind of understand that they don't have the forest in mind. They don't care. They're not... The person who doesn't... How do we explain this? Okay, so like, I worked in a warehouse, right? And there was this big bad boss that everybody was scared of, but nobody ever saw. Nobody ever saw the big bad boss, right? Like, he was always somewhere else, and he didn't really have any involvement whatsoever with the way things were ran. So people were scared of this guy that didn't know anything about the way the floor worked. I don't even remember where I was going with that one. I just don't understand. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to cut the trees down? Do you want me to not cut the trees down? You want to sit in the city and tell me that I'm doing something wrong by taking care of the land here? Like, I know what's going on out here? The guy in the office doesn't have any idea. He's been in the office all day. He's been sitting in there, checking his email, on a meeting, in meetings and whatnot. Meanwhile, I've been out here working on the floor. And I know what's going on with the flow issue and why things aren't moving. But he's going to come out and yell about this thing. I mean, yeah, I know he's a bad boss, but I mean, that's kind of the point. These people are bad bosses. They try to come out and paint us as, like, forest people, like people of the forest, people of the river. Like, they try to paint us as some sort of just, like, monster that wants to just destroy the forest and just go out there and completely just tear it up. And we want to cut all the trees down. We want to clear cut everything. We want to destroy it. We don't care about the animals. And that doesn't make any sense, because a lot of the places that are forest land, you have generations, multiple generations of families that have lived there and worked and managed that land for a long time. And I don't believe that any of the people around me would want to run the forest into the ground, because that's our livelihood. So I've always felt that the people that have the forest interest in mind and, are the people that work it and the people that live in it. Right. Controlled burns. Controlled burns have been the way for centuries by farmers. Their science doesn't mean shit compared to hands-on experience. It's true, 100%. Every year when they start field burning around here, there's always complaints. Oh, it's bad for the environment. It's bad for the air quality. It's bad for this, bad for that. I don't care. I get tired of these people that don't understand. And then It was one of my favorite stories was a couple years ago when Donald Trump came out and said, we need to get out there and sweep the floor, sweep the forest floor, and rake it up. And he got ridiculed for what he was saying. And I'm pretty sure I went through and did a video about that. And I actually went out live. Not live, but I went out and recorded the people cleaning up the forest floor. Trump had said they need to rake the forest. Now, there is places where raking the forest is part of forest management, but they use leaf blowers. So I went out to the forest, which, is just over there, and I filmed the people that were leaf blowing the forest. I mean, it's a real thing, and they do it. And the reason they were doing it is because all of that stuff on the ground burns really quick and leads right up to where their house is. So there's about 8 guys out there with leaf blowers blowing all of this shit down to the bottom of the hill, putting it in a truck, hauling it out of there. And they just make stuff up and try to say, oh, that's bad. So this guy that lives in that house up there on top of that hill should have just left all this shit laying on the ground, so he would have a hotter fire and a quicker fire that would burn up to his house. What? Thinning the forest, they're not talking about clear cutting. They're not talking about just wiping out the entire forest. And I honestly don't think a majority of the people that are opposed to this have ever been to a forest or ever actually seen how a forest works, have ever worked in a forest for sure. I know they've never worked in a forest. But just to take a drive through and to see how it works and to understand the way a managed and a working forest, to understand the way a working forest is managed, it changes your complete perspective on the forest. And most of the people that are saying don't touch it, don't do anything, haven't been out there to see the way it is. And we've drove through there and cut down bushes. I've showed you cutting trees out of the road, so we can get out there further and go see more of the forest. But it gets really dense and really thick, and unfortunately that's the stuff that burns. And they start so far out in the middle of nowhere that there's really nothing we can do but just let them burn, and we have to. And there was rules put in place, I believe it was the Bush administration, it was either Bush or Clinton, where there was the Roadless Act, and so they just stopped. They stopped building roads out there, they stopped clearing the roads out there, they gated a lot of stuff off and just let it go. And so that fire that was in this article, I don't know, one of the fires they talked about in this article happened up there in the roadless area. And, there was a policy for a while of just letting them burn, and that sucked. The state guys were on the outside line trying to stop the fire from spreading. Meanwhile, the federal guys were just watching it. Clear the brush and slow the spread. Yeah. All that stuff builds up, and we get, so everything is valleys. Everything around here goes from 500 feet to 1,400 feet, up and down, all day, all around. It was Clinton with the roadless, okay. But so it'll go from, you'll go down about river level up to 1,400 feet. And so you're going in and out of forests all day long. And those people that live up there do very intensive thinning. And you will see them log around their house. And it's just common knowledge, around here with the people that understand the forest, the things that we need to do to make sure we don't die in a fire. Rip Lavoie. I've been over to Lavoie Memorial Highway a few times. He made some good speeches. But yeah, it was Clinton with the Roadless Act. Okay. That's what I thought. I knew it was one of them. So, I mean, there's all the reasons for the benefits in burning. I mean, and it's, like I said, this was all in the Native Americans. This is what they did. We're just following their practices. More live streams would be nice. I can do that. That new lady they just hired for the Bureau of Land Management, who was actually involved with tree spiking. I don't know what this is going to look like. Let's see. There we go. Tried calling controlled burns a terrorist attack. That's a good one. So, I don't know what CPR news is. This, oh, it looks like it's a radio. Okay. So this was, I mean, this is recent. I don't know if this lady was approved or not. I didn't ever follow through on that. But a tree spiking incident from the 80s is looming over Biden's BLM nominee. I did notice it's hard to talk to people from the cities about BLM. I had some friends come down from Seattle, and I had told them that our house is surrounded by BLM and national forests. And I kept saying BLM, and they, like, the only thing in the news, BLM, was that thing. And so they finally stopped me, and they're like, what do you mean BLM? I'm like, oh, Bureau of Land Management. It's like the people that run the land, and they're like, oh, okay, they're the ones that run the campgrounds. And like, well, kinda. I mean, they run the campgrounds, but there's also, you know, the whole rest of the world out there. But anyway, an eco-terrorism incident from over 30 years ago is casting a long, dark shadow over the nomination. Hold on, I can't see here. There we go. Over the nomination of Tracy Stone Manning to be the next director of Bureau of Land Management. The state's Energy and Natural Resource Committee will vote whether to advance her nomination on Thursday. Where is it? Well, a lot of the facts of the case are in dispute. What most people agree on is this. In 1989, when she was a graduate student, Stone Manning mailed a letter to the Forest Service warning them that someone had spiked trees to prevent logging in Clearwater National Forest in Idaho. A few years later, she was granted immunity and testified against the two men, people she knew, who were eventually convicted for the crime. So, oh, right here, they do explain it. Tree spiking is when a nail or metal rod is driven into a tree, sometimes hidden in the bark. When the logger saws into the tree and hits the spike, it can shatter the chainsaw and send shards of metal flying. Radical environmental groups use this tactic over the decades in an effort to make it too unsafe to harvest timber in sensitive areas. There's debate on tree spiking, on whether... Okay, so I guess there is documented cases of tree spiking. But then there's also debate on how prevalent it actually was, on how often they used that tactic, or they just told people they spiked the trees, so they, well, we can't now, like, oh, we spiked that whole forest, guess you can't cut them down, and the guys are like, well, we can't risk it because we might die. There's two things that can happen. The chainsaw can hit it, and like it said, it screws up the chainsaw, but then also it can mess up the milling equipment when it gets to the mill, and if it hits a metal spike when it's going through a big saw, you can have a pretty catastrophic event. And so that's where I don't understand, or I don't know for sure if she was part of them. Like, she was part of this group. She was part of the whatever that was trying to stop stop them from logging the forest. But with her sending the letter to the Forest Service warning about the tree spiking, I don't know. Maybe she was trying to do the right thing and said, hey, my friends went too far. Maybe she was just a good activist saying, hey, please don't cut it down. And then she's like, oh, you guys are doing this stuff? That's not right. So, I mean, maybe she's a good guy, but I don't know. Just kind of seems like if you're hanging out with tree spikers, I don't know if I want you managing the forest, you know, but whatever. Yeah. People from the city think BLM is Black Lives Matter. That's exactly what it was. They had no idea. Like, there's more BLM road signs around here than there is, like, actual city street signs. I don't know if it's necessarily that they're stupid. I think it's just a matter of conditioning. And that's one example where you can see that, like, the level of you can see the level of conditioning, because there's two completely different worlds. You know what I mean? There's, like, in almost every issue, and in this one for sure, there's people who live in the forest, who work in the forest, who know what the Bureau of Land Management is, and know how to take care of a forest, how a forest should work, and all that. And then there's people in a city that think BLM means Black Lives Matter. It's the perfect juxtaposition. I don't know what the word is. Comparison, dichotomy, whatever. But it just shows the perfect division between the two. You know, like they don't even know what an actual department of the government is. You know, like a fairly prominent part of the government, because you think about how much land the Bureau of Land Management manages. That's a lot more significant than, you know, a group of communists. But, all right, how long we been going? 41 minutes? I don't even really have anything else to talk about. That's about it. There's a little bit more here about... I didn't finish reading through all this about the BLM director. I don't know if she was appointed or not, but I don't really care, to be honest with you. But yeah, hottest local headlines. I mean, especially with the internet now and the way they can divide information so solidly. Like, those people in the cities are getting such crazy information. I know my family comes down from Portland, you know, and they don't make any sense to me. Like, a lot of their issues, the things they care about, the problems they're having in their lives, you know, it's like, that's all extremely foreign to me, right? Because I've just been alive doing my thing. Like, I thought that's what we were supposed to do. Yeah, conditioning and ignorance. There's nothing wrong with peeing outside. I finished my coffee and I finished that joint. I was smoking the crutch. I mean, I guess we could check and see if there's any more headlines, but that was really all I wanted to talk about. I mean, one of the first things that pop up was, you know, more fire stuff. And it's crazy, too. One thing I noticed yesterday... it's okay to pee outside, man. One thing I noticed yesterday was, like, so fire season ended on Wednesday, and Thursday there was just burns everywhere, piles of stuff, slash burns. Everybody had their branches and leaves and yard waste and everything just burning. And it's crazy how quickly we can go from, like, I mean, we're still under drought conditions because we haven't had enough rain to meet the number of rains that we need, whatever, but everything, like, cooled down enough to where they're like, hell yeah, light them up. And so just there's plumes of smoke all over the place. You turn on the police scanner and there's, like, smoke investigation left and right. They're sending fire department everywhere to go check all these, and it's everybody just burning their leaves and burning all the brush that they cleaned up in their yard and all that stuff. Slash piles burning. Like, I almost feel worse for the firefighter guys right now. I mean, I know during fire season when it was, like, heavy and they were rotating, like, 12, 14-hour shifts out there fighting these big fires. I mean, but it would have to be quite quite the change to go from that to like just spending all day driving out to saying, nope, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, we got a report of smoke, you know, like however many miles out there, and it's not an easy drive. I mean, it's just easy. It's an easy drive, but it's not like a short distance, because if somebody spots smoke on the hill, like, oh, we got a smoke spot, now we got to drive an hour and 45 minutes around the bottom of this mountain until we can figure out how to get up there to find the guy's driveway to find out that he's just burning his slash pile. But I know they'll have guys out spotting. I've seen them parked on the side of the road with their binoculars just looking over, and they're like, nope, this is a controlled burn, you know. Like, everything's fine. But everybody's still reporting them like it's fire season. So, all right, well, 45 minutes, that was good. I appreciate you guys hanging out. If I find anything else that's worth a crap, maybe we'll go live later on. If not, oh well. I gotta go in and make some more coffee. The sun's almost up. Time to start working. You guys have a good Sunday. Be safe. Don't start the forest on fire.